Ms. Simpson, obviously you make your own investment voting decisions.
Oh, no, never mind. Restart the clock. I was going to make my comment, but...
Okay. Not everyone has your largest staff. Would you prefer your fellow voters and shareholders get professional advice or just rubber stamp whatever management tells them?
Independent advice is always a good idea. The interests of share owners and management are usually pretty well aligned. You know, ultimately we're on the same side.
Yes.
We want companies to do well. We want prosperity. We want good returns.
I represent a lot of your members. I couldn't agree more.
But unfortunately, there are areas of conflict. Executive compensation is a great idea. And for a small investor to look at that executive compensation disclosure, so complicated, and working out how it's changed over time, how to compare it with other companies, how to relate it to the financial performance. Gee whiz, you need a PhD in something to work that out. So I think that in the free flow of information in the markets...
Would you feel better as a major owner of Wells Fargo if they had a good clawback procedure that would make sure that any executive who perhaps left the company recently with over $100 million would have their compensation adjusted for what was really happening?
CalPERS has had a policy on clawbacks in favor of clawbacks, which are simply unearned rewards, which come out of share owner funds. We've had that policy before Dodd-Frank. We'll continue to have it and hope the SEC rulemaking is possible to all be finished and wrapped up soon. But it's an essential, it's an essential principle of fairness, of common sense, of alignment of interest.
I'd point out if Dodd-Frank had been promptly implemented, Wells Fargo executives might have the right incentives, and Wells Fargo might have 2 million fewer accounts. But it's taken the SEC a long time. We hope they get there. I'll also point out that if the chairman's legislation is passed, then all future corporations will not have the clawbacks that would have been relevant to Wells Fargo. Now, I've heard an estimate of $90 million as the cost of some level of shareholder democracy. One of the witnesses said that that was the cost of dealing with these proposals, didn't include board member time. How much shareholder value is lost because of crony capitalism, where boards prevent mergers, acquisitions that would have increased shareholder value, but were not in the interest of the board members, and especially not in the interest of the management that kind of selected them? Do you think that if every board decision on whether to agree to a merger was made in the shareholder interests, that shareholders might be enriched by an amount, say, over $90 million?
Looking at the numbers just on Wells Fargo, we have about $1 billion in that company, equity and debt, and then we've lost
so
on
you
this
lost,
episode about 11%.
Yeah.
So something over $90 million just in the one
just
company.
on that one company, just from one series of 2 million decisions that were not in the public interest. And there are significant, corporations choose to incorporate under the laws of whatever state does the best job of protecting management and furthering the goals of crony capitalism. Would CalPERS be in a better position if all these if the corporation codes of all the states had the same level of shareholder protection that California does? At least as applicable to the two or three, the major publicly traded corporations.
Well, two of the share owner rights that we think are most important are majority voting. That's the ability to vote no as well as yes on a director's election, and proxy access, which gives us, the owners, the right to put forward candidates onto the ballot. And I'm going to have to ask my learned colleagues. There are 1 or 2 states which have those provisions, but the main states where incorporation is popular, Delaware, California, and more, actually do not have that in the default.
Delaware is out there advertising, in effect, we'll protect management. We will defeat efforts to enhance shareholder value incorporate here. And needless to say, that has caught the attention of management. We ought to have shareholder protections that are national in nature. I see the governor would like to comment, but I think I'm going to let him.
Since we're going over here a little bit,
Well, I'm amused at these questions and the aspersions being cast here that there's these boards of directors running amok, somehow doing something that's in a breach of their fiduciary duty. And I'm also somewhat amused at citing CalPERS. You mentioned how many constituents. I'm looking at the Bloomberg report. CalPERS last year earned a rousing 0.6 return, and Ted Iliopoulos, the chief investment officer, said, you know, that is below the assumed rate of 7.5%. He said that's a significant policy issue. If I were worried about somebody today, I'd be worried about somebody who's hoping to get a pension from CalPERS with that puny rate of return, and maybe it's crony capitalism that's doing it. Maybe it's investment strategy. I don't know, but
Governor, not everyone can make a 7.5% return in this particular economy.
0.6.
And many investors lost a lot of money last year, and she just lost, or rather the organization she represents, just lost hundreds of millions of dollars because of the bad corporate governance that we'd like to see ended by enforcing and passing the regulations for clawback rather than supporting legislation that would eliminate that.
I don't think that's factually accurate. And is
You don't think she's
supportable.
lost hundreds of million dollars on Wells Fargo stock?
No.
The stock price has gone?
As of what date?
Share the numbers. No, it's
As of when?
I'm happy to follow up with the detail. And we can look at the
Anyone who owned $1
arithmetic
billion, that level of corporate stock has lost an awful lot of money as the stock has declined by 10%. As we've learned that management can't prevent 2 million frauds.
They did fire 5,300 employees that they found, and
That they hired and didn't
gentlemen's
monitor.
time. We're going down different
Thank
road
you.
here from corporate governance here. So gentleman's time has expired.